All right, let's dive into the world of Peter Zeihan
Oh, yeah.
and his predictions about this whole end of globalization thing.
Yeah.
So Zeihan, he's a geopolitical strategist, but he looks at things a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
He's really focused on demography and geography
Right.
to understand where the world's heading.
And he uses those things to understand like global economics and trade and all those things.
Yeah.
Pretty fascinating stuff.
We're looking specifically at his book, The End of the World is Just the Beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But for this deep dive,
Right.
we're zeroing in on his thoughts about how globalization, at least how we know it,
Yeah.
might be on its way out.
It's not your typical like, doomsday scenario.
Right.
What I find interesting is like he's not just laying out these changes.
Yeah.
He's digging into the why, like why are these things happening?
Sure.
And he's connecting things that you wouldn't necessarily think are connected.
Right.
Like birth rates and soybean production.
Yeah, it's like he's painting this really comprehensive picture. Yeah, totally.
And it's not just doom and gloom either.
No, not at all.
It's more about trying to understand these shifts so we can figure out how to deal with them.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so one of the biggest shifts he talks about is this concept of a demographic cliff.
Okay.
He basically points out that for decades, we've had this huge global population boom, which has really fueled an economic boom,
Right.
but that's about to change in a big way.
And it boils down to this.
Okay.
For decades, many countries, especially in the developed world,
Yeah.
had this like perfect storm of a large working age population
Okay.
and very few dependents.
Gotcha.
So it's like this, like hitting this demographic sweet spot where you have tons of people contributing to the economy,
Right.
fewer folks needing support.
It sounds like hitting the jackpot, right?
Exactly. Like,
But like all good things, it doesn't last forever, right?
So that's where Zeihan comes in.
He's arguing that this shift is happening faster than a lot of folks realize,
Okay.
particularly in developed countries.
Okay.
And we're seeing plummeting birth rates, rapidly aging populations.
Hmm.
And you see this, I mean, think Japan, China.
Yeah, they're already dealing with this.
Oh, yeah. And it's going to have a ripple effect, way beyond those countries.
So fewer people working, fewer people paying taxes, more people needing pensions and health care. That's got to put a strain on things.
Huge strain.
Is that where the cliff part comes in?
That's exactly it.
Okay.
This aging population, combined with that shrinking workforce, means slower economic growth, less innovation, and potentially even a scarcity of capital.
Okay, so this is a big deal.
Huge deal.
But Zeihan, he does mention a potential advantage for the U.S., right?
He does.
It has something to do with millennials.
Millennials, yeah.
Okay.
So Zeihan points out that the U.S. millennial generation is larger than in most other developed countries. Now, this isn't like a magic bullet or anything like that, but this could give the U.S. a bit more time to adapt to these changes that are happening globally.
So countries like China,
Exactly.
with their rapid decline, they're going to feel the pressure sooner.
Sooner, yeah.
So it sounds like the U.S. might have a little bit of wiggle room.
A little bit, but,
To figure things out.
not a ton.
But we're not off the hook.
No,
completely.
Not at all.
Even if the U.S. has this like temporary advantage.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean for people?
Right.
For businesses?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
It's not like we can just wait around and see what happens, right?
No, you've hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
Understanding this demographic shift, it's not about predicting doom and gloom.
Right.
It's about understanding these powerful forces that are at play.
Okay.
So for individuals, this might mean thinking about career choices in industries that might be less affected by a shrinking workforce.
Okay.
Or maybe planning for retirement differently.
Makes sense.
For businesses, this could mean adapting to a different consumer landscape.
Okay.
Or maybe exploring automation to address potential labor shortages.
So it's not just about national economies.
Right.
It's about how this impacts us
Exactly.
at a very personal level.
Very personal, yep.
But let's move on to the second big piece of Zeihan's analysis.
Okay.
And that's this idea of the return of geography.
Okay.
Now, I'll admit, this one threw me for a loop at first.
Look at that.
I was like, what's he talking about?
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Especially because we've been living in this world where globalization has made geography almost irrelevant.
Yeah.
I mean, we get products from anywhere.
Yeah.
Resources from all over the world.
Exactly. Everything's interconnected.
Exactly. But Zeihan argues that's going to change.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he uses some pretty interesting historical examples to make his point, right?
Yeah.
He does. He does.
Something about ancient Egypt and Spain.
Yeah. So, for example, he talks about ancient Egypt's reliance on the Nile River
Okay.
for its very survival.
Right.
Or how the location of the Iberian Peninsula shaped the success of civilizations like Spain and Portugal.
So he's highlighting how geography always played a role.
A crucial role?
In how nations rise and fall.
Exactly.
Okay, so globalization made physical location less important for a while.
Yeah.
But now that that's fading, things like access to resources, control over transportation routes, all those things are coming back into play.
They are. And think about it this way. Globalization allowed countries to rely on global trade and the U.S. Navy for security.
Okay.
But as that system weakens, geography will matter more than ever.
Okay.
Those countries with access to their own resources, with the ability to protect their trade routes, they're going to have a significant advantage.
So it's like the game board is changing, and we need to understand the new rules.
Absolutely.
And who the new winners and losers might be. And, for example, Zihan, he points to the U.S. with all of our internal waterways and resource wealth.
Abundant resources.
As a potential winner in this new landscape.
Yeah, potentially.
It's not just about reading maps, right?
No.
It's about understanding the power dynamics that geography dictates.
Yeah.
This is getting pretty interesting.
It is, yeah.
But before we go too far, let's pause here.
Okay.
And then we'll come back and we'll dive into that third factor that Zihan highlights.
Yeah.
And that is technology.
Great technology, right?
Because even in a deglobalized world, technology is going to keep evolving, right?
It is, but how it evolves and who controls those advancements will be heavily influenced by these very shifts we're discussing.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
We'll be back. All right, so let's talk tech.
Yeah, tech in a deglobalized world.
Yeah, it's fascinating how intertwined technology is with globalization.
Yeah.
Like, on the one hand, all these technological advancements made globalization possible. But on the other hand, the end of globalization, like we're talking about, could completely reshape how technology develops.
Right. It makes you wonder what innovations will emerge, who will be leading the charge.
Yeah, exactly.
And Zihan points to something that I think a lot of us take for granted.
Yeah.
And that's just the complexity of modern manufacturing.
Yes.
He uses a simple pair of jeans as an example.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, producing jeans actually involves this incredibly complex global supply chain.
Wow.
It touches like at least 10 different countries.
Oh, wow.
The cotton's from one place, the dyes from another, the zippers, the stitching.
Yeah.
It's all coming from different corners of the world.
It's mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah.
That simple pair of jeans represents this whole network of global trade.
And cooperation.
Like, we don't even think about it.
We don't.
Just buy our jeans.
Yeah, we just buy our jeans.
We don't think about how they got here.
Right.
But it highlights a major vulnerability.
Oh, for sure.
Right, because in a world with disrupted trade, geopolitical instability, all of that, these supply chains could just fall apart.
Totally. Zihan gives other examples too, like our dependence on Taiwan for semiconductors, Brazil for soybeans, things like that.
Imagine if those supply chains were disrupted.
It'd be chaos, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Zihan even touches on how all of this impacts the energy transition.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So like moving away from fossil fuels, it might be a lot more difficult in a world with less globalization.
Right, because it's not as simple as just flipping a switch, right? There are a lot of dependencies in place.
What are some of his concerns there?
Well, he expresses some concerns about our reliance on certain countries, like China.
For green technologies like solar panels and batteries.
Interesting.
And, he even suggests that some countries might have to rely more heavily on coal.
Oh, wow.
If these other alternatives become too expensive or too difficult to access.
So even well-intentioned shifts like moving to cleaner energy are going to be impacted by these geopolitical changes.
Absolutely. It's all connected.
This is all starting to feel very interconnected, right? The demographic shifts, the return of geography, and now the evolution of technology.
It's all a web. It's all intertwined.
Yeah, we can't look at these things in isolation.
Right. And I think that's Zihan's big point. He's urging us to see the bigger picture. Understanding how these trends are intertwined can help us make better decisions for the future.
Now, I think it's important to note here that he's not advocating for a return to isolationism.
No, not at all.
He's not saying we need to cut ourselves off from the rest of the world.
Right.
It's more about understanding the new realities and adapting to them.
Yeah. Adapting being flexible.
But how do we do that?
That's the question.
How do we take all of this information
Right.
and put it into action?
Yeah, I mean...
What does adapting to a less globalized world actually look like?
Yeah, what does it look like for individuals?
For people, for businesses?
Well, businesses, right?
What can we do?
Well, that's where it gets really practical, I think.
Okay.
And Zihan, he outlines a couple potential adaptations that we can make.
Okay.
One of them is diversifying supply chains.
Okay, so instead of relying on one or two sources
Exactly.
for essential resources or goods, businesses might need to start looking for regional partners.
Regional partners, exactly.
So less dependence on these long, fragile global supply chains,
Yep.
more focus on building relationships closer to home.
Exactly. Build those relationships, build those connections.
Is that the idea?
That's the idea. It's about creating more resilience, more flexibility in the face of potential disruptions. He also talks about investing in automation and upskilling workforces.
So that makes sense, especially given what we talked about with shrinking workforces.
Exactly.
So it's not just about where we produce things,
Yeah.
but how we produce them.
How we produce them, right?
We might need to think differently about that.
Absolutely.
And another point Zion emphasizes is building resilience and self-sufficiency.
Self-sufficiency, yeah.
Particularly when it comes to things like food and energy production.
Right. The things that we really, really need.
So being less reliant on external sources.
Yeah.
For those things that are absolutely essential.
Essential for our survival, for our society to function.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And lastly, he stresses the need to just stay informed, about demographic shifts and how they might impact things like local markets, consumer behavior.
Yeah, it's all about understanding those trends.
So businesses need to pay attention to who their customers are
and
what those customers are going to need as the world changes.
Absolutely, because those needs are going to change as the world changes.
By understanding these trends, we can make more informed decisions.
That's it. Informed decisions.
Whether it's about our career, investments or even where we choose to live.
Where we choose to live, yeah.
It feels like Zihan is giving us a roadmap for navigating this period of transition.
Yeah, like a roadmap for the future.
A roadmap that starts with understanding the big picture. And then thinking about how we can adapt. Both individually and collectively.
Individually and collectively, that's right.
It's about understanding those forces that are shaping our world. And then making choices that are aligned with those forces.
Exactly. It's about not just being reactive, but being proactive.
Yes, taking control, not being swept away.
Exactly, that's the key.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dives into Peter Zihan's predictions.
We have.
Everything from these demographic shifts, the return of geography, the evolving role of technology in a less globalized world.
Yeah, it's a lot, but I think what really stands out is how interconnected it all is.
It is.
You know, it's not just like these isolated trends. They're all kind of weaving together to create this new global landscape.
Exactly. It's like Zihan's giving us a whole new way to look at the world, like a new lens that helps us see the connections and understand the forces that are shaping our future.
Yeah, like a new set of glasses.
But now comes the big question. What do we do with this knowledge?
Well, the first thing is like, don't get overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
It is. You know, Zihan's work isn't about predicting doom and gloom.
Right.
It's about empowering us with knowledge so we can make informed choices.
It's about understanding the game.
Yeah.
So we can play it strategically.
Right, exactly.
So it's not about panicking.
No.
It's about being prepared.
Being prepared, yep.
But what does that look like in practice?
Yeah.
How do we apply these insights to our own lives and work?
Well, I think it's helpful to recap those key takeaways from Zihan's predictions.
Okay, so what's the first one?
The first one is that the decline of globalization isn't a sudden event.
Oh, yeah.
It's a gradual process, and honestly, it's already underway.
So it's not like we're going to wake up tomorrow and everything's going to be completely different.
Right. It's more of like this slow and steady shift in how the world operates.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the second takeaway is that these demographic shifts, these geographic realities, the way that technology evolves, those are going to have a profound impact on the world as we know it.
This isn't just about minor adjustments, right?
No, this is about fundamental changes to how we live, work, interact with the world.
Okay, so what's the third takeaway?
The third takeaway, and I think probably the most important one, is that understanding these trends is absolutely crucial for navigating the future. It's about recognizing the forces at play so we can make smart decisions about everything, about our careers, our investments.
Where we live.
Where we choose to live, yeah.
It's about taking control.
Yeah.
Not being swept away by the current.
Exactly.
And this brings me to a question for you, dear listener. Think about what we've talked about today, those shrinking workforces, shifting supply chains, the potential for more localized production. How might these trends affect your own life?
What opportunities might arise in your communities as a result of all these shifts?
Maybe there's a burgeoning local industry you could get involved in.
Right.
Or a chance to build more self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
These are big questions.
Big questions, yeah.
But they're worth thinking about.
They are. And, the end of globalization, at least as Anand describes it, it's not really an ending.
It's a beginning.
It's a beginning. It's a chance to reimagine our world.
What?
To build stronger, more resilient communities, and to forge a new path forward.
And to do that.
Yeah.
Not with fear, but with knowledge.
Knowledge, absolutely.
And a willingness to adapt.
Willingness to adapt, yeah.
Well said. And that, my friend, is the essence of the deep dive.
Yeah.
We don't just present information.
Yeah.
We encourage you to explore, to question, and ultimately to emerge with a deeper understanding of the world around us.
That's what it's all about.
We're all on this journey of discovery together.
Yeah.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts.
We would.
So head over to our social media platforms.
Yeah.
Share your insights, your questions, your predictions about the future.
Let's have a conversation.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Until next time.
Until next time.